In the dim corridors of Europe's forgotten past lies a ghost that once ruled with iron and fire. A name whispered with awe and fear alike. Prussia, a realm born not of peace, but of purpose, forged by faith, sharpened by war, and bound by an ambition so cold and precise, it would one day reshape the world. They called it the Duchy of the North, a land carved from the ashes of pagan tribes. But behind the banners and glory lay something darker, an ancient order, a vow of blood, and whispers that even the Vatican feared. Before Prussia became an empire, before it crowned its kings and marched upon Europe, it was merely an idea, a secret born in the shadow of faith and conquest. To understand Prussia, we must begin not in Berlin, not in Königsberg, but in Rome. Long before the black uniforms and the Iron Cross, Prussia's fate was written in the ink of papal decrees. In the 13th century, Pope Innocent III faced a problem. Pagan tribes, the Old Prussians, resisted Christianity on the Baltic frontier. They worshipped the forests, the stones, the moon, relics of an age the Church sought to erase. So the Pope turned to an army not of kingdoms but of zealots, the Teutonic Knights, warrior monks born of the crusades. Armed with divine permission and unyielding faith, the knights descended upon the Baltic like a holy plague. Villages burned, temples crumbled, and from the ruins of old Prussia they raised their fortress, Marienburg. Yet, within the Vatican archives, in the oldest codices of the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum Vaticanum, there exists a cryptic record. A papal bull, issued to the Teutonic Grand Master, speaks of more than conversion. It hints at a hidden relic, an object of celestial authority believed to rest among the pagan tribes, one that could grant divine right to rule lands forever consecrated by conquest. What was this relic? No historian knows. Some say it was a fragment of the true cross, others the fabled spear of destiny. But one thing is certain. After the crusade, the Teutonic Knights claimed dominion, and the old Prussians vanished. The 16th century arrived with storms of change. The Reformation tore through Europe, and with it, the authority of Rome. The once holy Teutonic order fractured, their faith divided, their castles abandoned. In 1525, the last Grand Master, Albert of Brandenburg, did the unthinkable. He broke his vows to the Pope. He turned from monk to monarch, from holy knight to heretic duke. Standing before King Sigismund I of Poland, Albert laid down his sword and converted to Lutheranism. In exchange, he received a crown, and with it, the birth of the Duchy of Prussia. This act, this defiance, marked the beginning of a new kind of power. Prussia would no longer fight for the Church. It would fight for destiny. But as Albert signed his name into history, the Vatican recorded his betrayal. In the archives of Rome, a parchment labeled De Ordinis Defection. On the defection of the order, describes him as a wolf cloaked in the garments of the faithful. Even centuries later, that parchment remains sealed, its edges blackened, as if burned by time itself. What secrets lay within those forbidden Vatican records? Were they mere condemnation or prophecy? By the 17th century, Prussia had transformed. Under the House of Hohenzollern, the duchy became a machine, disciplined, efficient, and silent. Frederick William, the Great Elector, rebuilt his realm from the ruins of the 30 Years' War. He centralized power, forged alliances, and raised an army that obeyed not God, but order itself. He once said, "All governance is nothing without the sword." To Prussia, war was not tragedy, it was necessity, it was creation. The Vatican watched in silence as this Protestant power grew stronger, unbound by papal influence. In the correspondence between cardinals, now archived under Sub Rosa Germanica, under the German Rose, the Church referred to Prussia as the Iron Heresy. Some Vatican scholars feared that this militarized Protestantism would one day eclipse the Holy Roman Empire itself, and it did. On the winter of 1701, in the city of Königsberg, Frederick III crowned himself king in Prussia, not by the blessing of Rome, but by his own decree. Church bells rang, but not for faith, for sovereignty. The Duchy had become a kingdom, and beneath the cathedrals of Rome, whispers began again of a power rising beyond the Vatican's reach. The kingdom of Prussia was young, but its ambitions were ancient. In the cold heart of Europe, a new dynasty rose, one that saw discipline as faith and conquest as destiny. Its bloodline would give birth to a man who became legend, feared by kings, admired by generals, and studied by history itself, Frederick the Great. Born in 1712, Frederick II was not the son his father wanted. While King Frederick William I was a man of iron, obsessed with soldiers and obedience, his son was drawn to music, philosophy, and the forbidden writings of Voltaire. Yet the boy who once dreamed of art would become one of the most brilliant military minds the world had ever seen. Some say it was rebellion that forged his genius. Others whisper it was something darker, a pact with destiny itself. In the dim halls of the Vatican archives, there exists a document called Codex Bellum Prussicum, the Prussian Book of War, a letter written by a papal observer during the 7 Years' War, describes Frederick's campaigns as guided by an unseen intelligence, mechanical, inhuman, and perfect. The Church could not explain his victories, nor the ruthless precision of his army. It was as if Prussia had become a living machine, a nation that breathed in strategy and exhaled domination. Frederick transformed his kingdom into a forge of war. Under his command, the Prussian army became the clockwork of death. Every man a cog, every battle a calculation. At Leuthen, at Rossbach, he defied empires and shattered alliances. Against overwhelming odds, he stood alone and prevailed. But behind the glory, whispers lingered. In 1757, after a near defeat, Frederick vanished from his command tent for 3 days. His officers believed he had fled. But when he returned, his orders changed everything, turning certain defeat into impossible victory. According to rumor, he spent those missing days in a secluded chapel near Silesia, consulting a relic said to have belonged to the Teutonic Knights, the same order that birthed Prussia centuries earlier. The Vatican's archives contain reference to this relic. Lanci Nordica, the northern spear, said to have been carried by a crusader who never died, his tomb sealed beneath the Baltic sands. Myth or manipulation, no one can say, yet Frederick's power only grew. He ruled not by divine right, but by the right of intellect and will. The state, he said, is nothing but the army in disguise, and so Prussia became not a land, but a system, the perfect instrument of war. Rome could no longer ignore this power. In secret correspondence between the Jesuit order and the papal curia, they spoke of the Iron Kingdom as a threat to spiritual order. One letter, preserved under code S36 Germania, warns that Prussia's faith is not in heaven, but in reason, and reason unchecked is the devil's throne. By the late 18th century, Prussia stood among Europe's great powers, but the old world was about to burn. Across the Rhine, a storm was rising, the French Revolution. Thrones crumbled, kings fell, and in the chaos, a new emperor emerged, Napoleon Bonaparte, the child of revolution, the destroyer of empires. In him, Prussia met its equal and its ruin. The year was 1806. The Prussian army, proud and disciplined, marched against France. But Napoleon was no ordinary enemy. His tactics were unpredictable, his movements fluid. At Jena and Auerstedt, Prussia's clockwork army was shattered in a single day. The eagle was broken, its lands occupied, its king humiliated. Yet even as Napoleon marched through Berlin, he ordered his men to spare one building, the Royal Library. According to later accounts, hidden within that library were forbidden manuscripts dating back to the Teutonic Order, maps, coded letters, and fragments of a lost papal correspondence concerning the relic of dominion. Napoleon, who often visited the Vatican archives himself, is said to have sought those very documents. Some believe he found them. Others claim the Prussian clergy removed them beforehand, hiding them deep within Königsberg's catacombs, never to be seen again. But something changed in Napoleon after Prussia's fall. His later writings reveal an obsession with destiny, fate, and prophecy, as if he, too, had glimpsed the same forbidden thread that ran through Prussia's past. After his defeat at Waterloo, the relic, the letters, and their legends all vanished once more into the shadows of history. Yet, from defeat, Prussia rose again. Under a new generation of statesmen and generals, it rebuilt, stronger, colder, sharper. By the mid-19th century, under Otto von Bismarck, it was no longer the servant of kings. It was the maker of them. And as Europe watched in fear, Prussia prepared to claim what the Vatican had long denied it: divine dominion through human will. By the mid-19th century, the fires of revolution swept across Europe. Monarchs trembled, empires wavered, and amid the chaos, one nation stood silent, calculating. Prussia. Behind its steel-fast aid stood a man unlike any other, Otto von Bismarck. Cold, brilliant, and relentless, he was not a king nor a priest, but something far more dangerous. A thinker who believed destiny could be engineered. They called him the Iron Chancellor. To him, faith, diplomacy, and morality were tools. His true altar was power, not by speeches, he said, but by blood and iron shall the great questions of our time be decided. And so he began his holy war of unification. The Vatican watched with unease. Bismarck was a Protestant leading a crusade not for God, but for nationhood. His ambition was to forge all the German states into one empire, under Prussia's crown, and to do so, he would manipulate kings, deceive rivals, and ignite wars that would redraw the map of Europe. First, he struck Denmark, then Austria, each conflict calculated to the minute, each victory serving the grand design. In 1870, his final target emerged: France. When a Hohenzollern prince was offered the Spanish throne, France took it as an insult. Bismarck twisted the insult into a declaration of war. And with that, the Franco-Prussian War began, the final step in Prussia's rise. The battles were swift, merciless, and mechanical, as if history itself marched to Prussia's rhythm. French armies crumbled, Paris fell, and in the winter of 1871, within the mirrored halls of Versailles, the unthinkable happened. Surrounded by generals and nobles, King Wilhelm I of Prussia was proclaimed Kaiser, Emperor of Germany. The eagle that had once guarded the Baltic now ruled a continent. From the ashes of duchies and kingdoms, the German Empire was born. Prussia's destiny was fulfilled. Yet beneath the triumph, the Vatican stirred. Within the sealed chambers of the archives, under the section marked Europa Occulta, Hidden Europe, lies a report dated 1872. It speaks of a new empire forged by human will alone, without divine sanction, yet under divine influence. Some within the Curia feared Prussia's unity was not merely political, but prophetic. They drew parallels to ancient texts, prophecies of an empire born from rebellion, guided by intellect, and destined to challenge the Church itself. The phrase Iron Kingdom appeared again alongside a warning. The power that once served the cross now wields it as a weapon. Whether coincidence or revelation, no one can say. But the myth of Prussia had become more than history. It had become an idea that order could replace faith, that men could command destiny without the need of heaven. The Vatican's concern deepened as Bismarck launched his Kulturkampf, the struggle against the Catholic Church within the new empire. Priests were arrested, monasteries closed, schools stripped of faith. Rome denounced him. Bismarck merely smiled. "We will not march backward into the past," he said. "We will not be the servants of Rome." The Vatican responded in silence, yet within its hidden vaults rumors grew. It was said that the original papal bull granting the Teutonic Knights their right to conquer Prussia, the document that began it all, was removed from public record. Some claimed it was destroyed. Others believed it was locked away with the documents of Galileo, the Templars, and the lost correspondence of Constantine in the deepest vault where no historian is allowed. Perhaps Rome feared what that parchment truly declared, that the conquest of Prussia was not meant to be holy, but eternal. As decades passed, Prussia's machine turned ever faster. Its science advanced, its armies multiplied, its empire expanded. Yet the more it grew, the colder it became. The flame that once burned for destiny now consumed itself in ambition. In the shadows of the 20th century, that same machinery of discipline and obedience would give birth to something darker. A regime that carried the ghost of Prussia's legacy, stripped of mercy and crowned with iron. But that is another story. In the end, the name of Prussia faded from maps, its crown dissolved, its language swallowed by modern borders. Yet its spirit endures, in order, in industry, in the cold precision of power. The Vatican keeps its silence, the relics remain sealed. The myths endure. Perhaps in some forgotten corridor of the Archivum Secretum, beneath layers of dust and secrecy, there lies a single scroll that began it all, a command from heaven or from something far older. And as history moves forward, one question remains. Was Prussia merely a nation? Or was it the manifestation of a greater design, hidden beneath the surface of faith, forged by man, and blessed by shadows? Empires rise, empires fall, but some never truly die. Prussia was more than a kingdom. It was an idea, a silent code written into the veins of Europe itself, the belief that discipline conquers chaos. That order transcends faith, that destiny can be engineered, and though its banners have faded, its shadow lingers in the steel of armies, the gears of industry, and the cold strategies of modern power. Some say the Vatican still holds records too dangerous to release, scrolls that trace the line from the Teutonic Knights to the Black Eagles of Berlin, from papal blessings to engines of war. Others believe those secrets were never meant for mortal eyes, but history as a way of remembering even what's been buried. The question is, what else still lies hidden beneath the seal of Rome? What truths about faith, empire, and human ambition were locked away to protect us from ourselves? If the walls of the Vatican archives could speak, would they tell us the story of God's will or man's defiance? Perhaps both. This was the rise of Prussia, the duchy that became an empire, the empire that became a legend, and the legend that became a warning. I'm your host, and this is Unsolved History. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden past, the forbidden truths the world forgot, make sure to subscribe, turn on the bell, and share this story with those who still believe history is more than dates and names. Because in every myth, there's a fragment of truth, and in every truth, a shadow waiting to be revealed.